Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this fourth session of self-improvement to the Quran series, which we have begun for the month of Ramadan. Again, reminding ourselves of the fact that how important this connection with the Quran is in the month of Ramadan. The very fasts that we observe in this holy month is because of the fact that the it's like a gratitude we pay to the Almighty for revealing, or the revelation of the Quran, which began in this month, is something which was deemed to be an act of gratitude on our part, and therefore the Almighty provided us with the opportunity to express this gratitude by fasting in this month. So today, the passage of the Quran that we are going to read is just being displayed before you on the screen. You can see this is actually verse 177 of Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah, and I'm just going to read out the text and translation before you. So the words are: لَيْسَ الْبِرَّ أَن تُوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ قِبَلَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ وَآتَى الْمَالَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ ذَوِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون. Loyalty to God does not merely mean that you face the east or the west in their prayer, but loyalty is the loyalty of those who believe in God with all their heart, and in the last day, and in the angels of God, and in his books, and in his prophets, and who, in spite of their love for wealth, spend it on kinsfolk, the orphans, the destitute, the traveler, and on those who ask, and for the liberation of necks, and those who are diligent in their prayer and pay zakat. And loyalty is the loyalty of those who, when make a promise, fulfill it, and especially of those who are steadfast in scarcity, illness, and in times of war. These are the people who are truthful to God in fulfilling the promise of loyalty to Him. And these are the ones who are, in fact, God conscious. So the question which is discussed here is, what exactly do we imply by the word loyalty? In the previous verses, or if you look at the context of Surah Al-Baqarah, we know that there was this dispute between the Jews and Christians regarding the direction in which they would pray. And one of them clung to the eastern direction, and one of them to the western direction. And in this regard, the Baitul Maqdis, of course, was divided between them. And it seems that this was the real impetus that they gave. Instead of observing certain other important areas in which we are required to be attentive before God, and of course we are required to be good to our human beings, they were severely neglected. And everything, the stress of everything, ultimately boiled down to facing the Qibla either in the eastern direction or on the western direction. So basically, this verse is prodding people that, you see, when you are fulfilling your pledge towards loyalty towards the Almighty, then remember, this loyalty towards the Almighty is not, something which is based on certain apparent observances, as is the case here. This loyalty is something which is far, far greater and far, far deeper. And if you think that this is how you can win the favor of God, then this is not correct. So remember, it was in this era of the times of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he was, he was the inheritor of the final book, and before him, it was the people of the book who basically had, who were the recipients of a divine book, and the Torah, of course, being revealed to Moses, and the Injil being revealed to Jesus, and both of them had their disputes with one another, and one of these disputes related to the direction in which they would pray, and they were hell bent in emphasizing that this is how the rituals should be undertaken. So the Quran has taken a moment off here and told them that, remember, it is the heart and the soul of something that has to be really followed. Some of the apparent things that you are laying emphasis on, they hold no meaning if the internal essence of something is neglected. So the question of loyalty with God had come into discussion, and this verse, this slightly lengthy verse, actually tells us that this loyalty towards God is not something which hinges on the direction of the prayer. In fact, as the verse says, the loyalty of this of your relationship with the Almighty is far more deeper. And it says, وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالْكِتَابِ وَالنَّبِيِّينَ. So these five things are spelled out, and it is said that to be loyal to the Almighty is something which relates to a deep relationship with Him, to believe in Him, and to believe in the hereafter, and to believe in the angels and the book, and of course the prophets. So the five pillars of belief are mentioned here, and they are mentioned in a specific order as well. And the first thing which is mentioned is, of course, belief in the Almighty. Unless we believe in God Almighty, we just cannot explain our own existence, and neither can we explain the existence of this universe and the way it has been governed. So, belief in God is something which should come to us naturally, and it does come to us naturally because we feel intuitively connected to a superior being. We feel intuitively connected to someone who has created us. And although the next step is something which is always provided guidance through the divine institution of revelation, but until before that, there's there's a creator who has created us. This is something which is an inborn feeling that all of us have. What exactly is that creator? How is he going to deal with us, and how is he? Are we going to connect with us? Is something which is the next step, and which, of course, divine revelation tells us. But before that, this is something that we intuitively know. And then, of course, the day of judgment, which, of course, is something that cannot be missed out if we believe in God. Otherwise, the God that we believe in would be an unjust creator, a creator who is viewing the horrors and the misgivings of this world with pleasure, so to speak, and he does nothing to rectify them. So it is only the day of judgment which explains that why this world has been created in a way that it is going on, and people can do whatever they like. But remember, if you believe in God, and you must believe in the last day, because God is not going to let people go the way they think they are going. He's going to take account of them. And then the mediators between God and his prophets towards whom he's sent his revelation are the angels. And we have to understand that one of the reasons for people indulging in polytheism is because of this lack of belief in the angels of God. And they would always think that it is their own deities who are connecting them to God. And so it was essential to tell them that, well, the connection is between human beings and the divine is through these angels. And you don't need to bring those deities in between. They're not going to win anything for you before the Almighty. It is these angels who bring down his revelation, and they too are subject to the will of God, and they, of course, cannot in any way bring you any favor. And as you know, the Quran tells us that the idolaters of Mecca, they would regard these angels to be the daughters of God, and they would think that if you please these angels, then these angels would be able to win over the hereafter for them. The book of God, of course, here refers to the fact that a book which is revealed from the Almighty is essential that you believe in every book that has been sent down. It is generically mentioned here. And then, of course, the prophets of God with whom these books descend. So after mentioning these pillars of faith, the Quran goes on to say that these are people who spend in his way in spite of their love for wealth, in spite of their need for wealth. They are people who are concentrating on fulfilling the needs of other people. So it's not just that they fulfill their own needs, they look upon other people. And then there's a list which is given here. And this includes the Vil Qurba, Wal Yatama, Wal Masakin, Wabn Sabil, which means that they spend on their near of kin, on the orphans, on the needy, on the traveler, and people who ask, and of course, for the liberation of necks. So we have to understand that in order to spend money for the cause of God, the best recipe in this regard is that you spend on the underprivileged or the neglected and deprived sections of the society. So whether they belong to our own kin, of course, they hold the most right on us, or whether they are orphans or needy, or the traveler. And the traveler in the times of the Quran, of course, was someone who was left at the mercy of the city that he would arrive, and he would have to be looked after. It's not the traveler of today that the Quran is speaking of. The travelers in the times of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, these travelers had to undergo a lot of difficulty, not only while traveling, but also if they were traveling to an unknown city or a city which was not known to them, and they needed help from people who would live there. And of course, for the liberation of necks, we know that the Quran has laid out this whole policy of emancipation of slavery, although it was done gradually. But during that time, people were urged to liberate the necks of people by buying off slaves and just letting them into the society. And then it says, وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ. So these are the two important worship rituals that are mentioned, and you must must realize that these are the two worship rituals that are often they are mentioned side by side. وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ. They are the people who are diligent in the prayer. They don't they're not irresponsible while praying, and neither they shirk their responsibility of paying zakat. So two of these worship pillars, the reason that they are often mentioned together is that one of them connects you to God Almighty, which is the prayer, and the other one connects you to your own brethren. So this also shows that the Almighty wants us to be connected, to remain connected, not only with God, but to our own brethren. And any extreme or any one-sidedness in this would result in an imbalance. So if we are totally devoted to God and we neglect our brethren, this is an imbalance. Similarly, if we totally devote ourselves to the betterment of the people or our brethren, and we just forget God, or we are not fulfilling His rights, then again this is an attitude which would require a lot of balancing. So the balanced attitude is that you give your due to both the Creator and to your fellow brethren. So one is through the salah and the other is through zakah. So وَأَقَامَ الصَّلَاةَ وَآتَ الزَّكَاةَ وَالْمُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا عَاهَدُوا. And the next thing is that when they make a commitment, they abide by it. And this is an area, of course, which relates to our common dealings, viewers, and we all know that how at times we flout this directive. We give a word, we give our promise to someone, and even when we tell someone that, well, I'm going to do something, or I'm going to come at this time, or when I'm going to promise to do something at the cost of certain other things, I give my word for that. And how often do we honor our word? This is a question that each one of us must ask one's own self, that giving one's word and to honor one's word is something which is of utmost importance. So it's like a commitment, it's like a pledge that we make with that person. And to elaborate this further, you can see that the whole religion that we profess faith in is basically a pledge. It's a covenant with God. So basically, when we follow or we make this commitment that we are going to follow your religion, it's like a commitment that we make. It's like a promise that we give to the Almighty. So precisely for this reason, religion is called misaq, which is covenant. So covenants have to be honored. So following the dictates of religion is something that has to be upheld at all costs. So وَالْمُوفُونَ بِعَهْدِهِمْ إِذَا ahadu. And then it is said that these are the people who وَالصَّابِرِينَ فِي الْبَأْسَاءِ وَالضَّرَّاءِ وَحِينَ الْبَأْسِ. They are people who persevere and these are the three instances that we commonly encounter. The first is scarcity, which means that we are deprived of resources. We may be suffering through poverty. We are constrained in our resources. And the second is dharra, and this generally refers to illness, and then in times of war. So generally, whenever we are put to trial, it is through these three circumstances. So either because of scarcity of sources, or because of illness, or because we're living in a war-stricken society in which there is lack of security. So lack of security, illness, and scarcity of resources. These are some of the common trials that all of us may go through periodically, or even consecutively maybe, or even simultaneously. But look what the Quran tells us. The Quran says that people who are loyal to God, who make this promise of loyalty to God, they are not just people who are fastidious in the prayer, whether their direction should be east or west, but they are ones who actually honor this essence of faith. And one of this essence is that in times of scarcity, in times of illness, and in times of war, you always persevere. You take this as a challenge. These trials come and go. They make us, they give us an opportunity to come close to God. They make us stronger than before. All of us, when we pass through these trials, once we come out of these trials, we feel that we are better than before. We are stronger than before. And of course, it is also something which makes us close to the Almighty. Because He has said that He will try people, and it's always easy to be, it's always very easy for us to be thankful to God and to be patient when the circumstances are good. But when circumstances are really, really tough, then the metal that God is going to test is the real metal, and that success is the real success. So when the Quran in this closing sentence says that people who do all these things are the ones who are righteous. They are truthful to their claim of fulfilling their promise towards God, the promise of loyalty. So, ulaika allazina sadaku, that these are the people who are really loyal to the Almighty. Forget about others. But ulaika humul muttaqun, and these are the periods who have taqwa. These are the people who have taqwa, who are God conscious, who are aware of their limits, who don't cross their limits, and they are the ones who, of course, would ultimately succeed in the eyes of the Almighty. So this brings me to an end to this brief explanation of this passage that I've just read out. Now I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Shehzad, for this section talk on Ayah 177. We have Noshaba Wasim for the first question. Noshaba, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. So my question is, can we combine two prayers, pray together? If yes, what condition we can combine two pray? That's my question.
So yes, prayers can be combined, but you have to have a reason for that. The reason could be a discomfort of a journey. It could be discomfort of an illness. It could be the discomfort of any pressing engagement. So any of these things, they warrant that you can combine your prayer. And you should not do it without any reason. There has to be some reason. For example, as I said, these are some of the instances, and some other instances would be when you're traveling. You might know that you would miss the prayer because of your travel or because of the discomfort in travel. So you can combine your prayers as well in that instance. So it's basically governed by any form of discomfort, any form of out of the normal situation in which you would not be able to offer the prayer on its stipulated time. And one more direction which has been given to us in this regard by the Prophet is that when you combine prayers, then the Zohar and the Asr can be combined at either time, and the Maghrib and the Isha can be combined at either time. The Fajr prayer cannot be combined with any prayer. Of course, this is also common sense. There is no prayer occurs near it. But Zohar and Asr, they can be combined, and Maghrib and Isha, they can be combined.
Okay. So in Quran, 5-time prayers are mentioned, or these 3-time prayers are mentioned? Because some people are saying.
Right. Actually, you have to understand that the Quran is not a book that is going to describe the details of the prayer. It's a pre-existing sunnah of the prophets of God. The prayer, in fact, all worship rituals, including animal sacrifice, including Hajj, including the fast that we are keeping at in this blessed month, and the zakah and the rates of zakat as well. So all of them have been transmitted by the practice of the Prophet, and he received this practice through earlier prophets. And so either he reformed them, or he revived them, or he made additions to them. So basically, we have to understand that the source of Islam is not just the Quran. It is the Quran. Yes, that's one source, and that basically describes morality and our beliefs. But then there is a practical source of religion also, which is the practice of the Prophet himself. So all the worship rituals, including the prayer about whom you've just asked, they have been transmitted as a practice of the Prophet. And the Quran just refers to them as if it is something of an established thing. So the Quran does not need to actually refer to the details of the prayer, because it was something that already existed in the society earlier on. And if there were any innovations that were going on, all that was needed was to correct them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Rabia Jamil, you may go ahead now.
Assalamu alaikum. I have a question about today's lesson. As per Ayah, loyalty is not about praying in a specific direction. So in Islam, we are bound to pray in a specific direction. So why is it so? And on the other hand, Allah is everywhere. So why we are bound to pray in a specific direction as we can pray anywhere? Please, this is my question.
Okay. I mean, this doesn't mean that we don't have to face the Qibla. I mean, what the context of the verse is that religion is not just found in one particular thing, and that is facing God in a particular direction. So the stress of this verse is not that you don't have to face a particular direction. The verse is saying that the Jews and the Christians, they're fighting on each other whether they should pray in the eastern direction or in the western direction. So they are being told that, remember, this is just a small part of religion. The essence of religion is something which is different, and then that is described. So, regardless of the fact, what the Quran is telling them is that you're disputing on the wrong thing. I mean, you're laying stress on something which is very small in its stature, in its nature. So, it doesn't mean that you don't have to pray in a particular direction. Yes, you have to pray in the direction of the Qibla, but the stress is that if you think that all that Islam is facing the Qibla and you're neglecting the rest of the important areas of Islam, then you are missing a greater part of religion. So that is what the stress is here. As far as facing God is concerned, the question that He is everywhere and why do we need to face Him in a particular direction? Well, this is something which is creating uniformity and discipline amongst the believers. You are prostrating before a deity, before a being who has created you. And in order to bring sense in that praying in that direction, that could only would have been possible, of course, if you are praying in congregation, especially, and you are facing a particular direction. So if you are not facing the house of God and you are facing, any other place or any other direction, then this is something that would disrupt your unity and uniformity. So the Sunnah of the Prophet insists that you must pray in the direction of the house of God. So it's not just God. Yes, God is everywhere. But then a next step has been made that we are directed to pray towards the house of God. And that house of God, of course, is one. So in order to create that uniformity, all of us have been directed to pray in that particular direction.
Baran Nashur, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
I had a question about Laylatul Qadr, because I've heard that when you make dua on Laylatul Qadr, it can change the Qadr itself. So does that mean that when we make dua on Laylatul Qadr, we can change what would be destined for us?
Where have you heard this?
Social media.
So you see, you need to verify whatever you hear and you look up, because you see things of all kinds circulate in the social media. We just need to understand the general principle regarding dua. So whether it's Laylatul Qadr or whether it's outside of Laylatul Qadr, our prayer is something which connects ourselves to God. And there are certain prayers or duas or supplications about whom God has said, well, unless you ask me, I'm not going to give you. So it's not like it's written that there are certain things which have been granted, which shall be granted regardless of whether you ask for them or not, because there are certain things about which God has decided that unless you ask me, I'm not going to give it to you. So you have to understand whether it's Laylatul Qadr or whether it's outside of Laylatul Qadr. The principle is the same, that you have to connect to God by asking Him. There are certain things which will only be given if you ask for them. And as far as other things are concerned, of course, they are like gifts and favors of the Almighty, which He showers and continues to shower on us for some of our good deeds. But of course, they are separate. But there is no different law for the Laylatul Qadr in this regard. And this fact that it changes destiny or it changes our, what has been written, again, has to be understood in this light, that there are certain things which have been left to our prayer. If the implication is that basically if you ask for God for something, only then it will be given. And if this is interpreted to mean that the Qadr is going to change, then yes, my answer is yes. But as I said, just like a loose statement, and you have to qualify it, and it goes and it works both for Laylatul Qadr and for other nights as well. That unless you ask, you're not going to be given. And other than that, you should continue to ask whatever you need. Either it shall be granted, or it shall be deferred, or it shall be just stored up as a treasure of reward on the day of judgment. So this is what we have been told regarding any particular dua.
Yeah, the example that was given was like, for example, if you would die in a car crash that year and you make dua like protect me, that your death would be postponed if God would grant it to you.
I think this is all wishful thinking, and there's nothing to corroborate it. We have to go by the Quran and by authentic narratives. I don't find anything to support what social media is saying, as you just said.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Tariq Javed, you may go ahead now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Allah Ta'ala has specified 6 different categories of people who are deserving of our anfaq or charity. So my question is, are they in the order of sequence, like the relatives are the most deserving, And my second question is, Allah Ta'ala has mentioned zakat in the same ayat. So does it mean these are the people who deserve zakat, and or these are the people who deserve other charities as well?
So if you go by the verse, yes, the answer to the first question would be that it's the order that has been given, and especially if the needy are found in your own family, then they should be given the top priority. That is why Zabil Qurba is the first head which is mentioned. And this is mentioned by the words wa'atal mal ala hubbihi. So the word mal is used, which is general. I mean, this is wealth of all kind. But the later part of the verse, which mentions zakat, is again, it's a general term. It's not qualified by the five heads which are mentioned above. So atal mala, the thing which is mentioned earlier, and then their five heads are given. So these are generally heads which are called the heads of infaq or charity. And zakat is the mandatory amount of charity that you have to give. So that is mentioned later on. And as far as the heads of charity are concerned, or sadaqat are concerned, they are already mentioned separately in Surah Tawbah, the 60th verse. But earlier on, the verse that you are referring to, or the heads that you are referring to, they are heads, they are recipients of your charity, basically. They are not recipients of your zakat, although there are some, of course, which overlap there. But specifically, the heads of zakat are mentioned separately in the 60th verse of Surah Tawbah. This particular verse is mentioning the heads of infaq.
So there could be a case that our relatives are also orphans. So could we say that they are the most deserving people?
Absolutely. I mean, this would mean that not one but two traits have combined in them. That not only they are orphans, but they are also your near of kin. So that would make their case much more stronger.
Mariam, you may go ahead now.
Assalamu alaikum. I also have a question regarding the zakat rulings. So I'm just wondering if if a person has inherited a certain amount of wealth which reaches the nisab amount, but they themselves do not earn, they earn like minimum wage. They're just starting off with their job. So how would the rulings of zakat apply to that?
So you see, I mean, that's slightly would need a little more elaborate answer. As far as your zakat is concerned, first you'd have to understand that all personal items of daily use, they are exempt. I mean, your personal car, your personal house, your belongings, the things that you own in a house and you use them, including your jewelry, which is of personal use, it's all exempt. Now, as far as things are concerned in which, I mean, you just referred to that that person is just starting off his career or her career and just starting to earn, but the wealth that he or she owns is it does cross the stipulatory exemption of nisab. Then yes, I mean, in spite of that, you have to calculate your zakat. So if you're not being able to give it at that time, all that you may do is just write it down on a piece of paper, and maybe you can give it later on in installments. And also, as I said, if you think that jewelry and assets and things that are of personal use, they're all exempt, it may well be that, I mean, as far as wealth is concerned, there would be no zakat on you unless you start earning. And then the other thing is that if wherever you're living, you're also paying taxes, except in the UAE maybe. But wherever you're living, you're paying taxes, and precisely for the reason that you give zakat is the same as you give tax also. So if you are paying tax on your wealth, on your property, on your income, on your sales, whatever, so that can be subtracted from the zakat liability that is due on you. So, I mean, if you calculate your zakat in this way, I'm sure that the thing that you have in mind that zakat would become a burden, I think it will not. I mean, in fact, it might well be that because you are paying enough taxes that it could be that you have already paid your zakat. So you just need to sit down and calculate.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, so taxes are included in the zakat that you give, or they're subtracted?
So they are subtracted. I mean, for example, if you are paying an X amount of tax, let's say $100 in tax, and the zakat that is liable for you to pay is $60. So that would mean that you have paid $40 in more tax, I mean, more zakat. So you see, zakat and tax are one of the same things. If your liability is $60 of zakat and you've paid $100 in taxes, then you can subtract those $60 from your taxes, which would still mean that you are $40 ahead. Even those $40 could be used for the next year as an advanced payment of zakat. So whatever liability of zakat that you calculate, you can subtract it from your tax liability. And whatever the balance, I mean, if the zakat is more than the tax which is due, only then you need to pay. For example, you had to pay, let's say, $100 in zakat, but your taxes are $60, which are less, of course. In that case, because you were liable to pay 100, but you've already paid 60, so you just pay 40 more to make it equal.
Thank you, Mariam. Yasin Fahad, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. My question is about when the kids should start fasting, because these days the girls especially, they can reach puberty at the age of 9 or 10, and expecting a child at the age of 9 or 10 to keep all 30 fast or to tell them that it's mandatory doesn't make sense. So my understanding is when they have the shaur, but how do you define what the age for the shaur is?
So, as you rightly said, it is not sexual maturity which governs the liability or the obligation of worship rituals. It is mental maturity. I mean, as soon as a person reaches mental maturity, which is different for different people, so in which you know what right and wrong is. So all that you need to tell your children is that once you are aware of what right and wrong is, then that is the time that you should start fasting. And as I said, this varies a lot. It could be different for different people. It could be age 12, 13, 15, whatever the age. So instead of stipulating an age, what you need to do is you make them understand that the thing or the basis of fasting is not the age as much as it is mental maturity. And let the child decide for itself.
There is a factor for tolerance also, right? I mean, we cannot expect a 10-year-old to have that kind of tolerance to keep 30 fasts in a row, especially in Canada. If it's in summer, we could have like an 18, 19-hour fast.
Right. So I think it's that what you need to just tell your children or your next generation is that it is basically mental maturity, which means that you are aware now that you have a creator. You'll be held accountable before him for good and bad deeds. This is what we call mental maturity. So as soon as a person becomes aware of this fact that he or she would be held accountable for whatever she's doing in this world, that is the time when they should start thinking.
Thank you. Naveed Irfan, you may have your question now. And this will be the last question for today.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मेरा सवाल ये है कि अगर मैं ईशा की नमाज के लिए गया और जमात खड़ी हो चुकी, खत्म हो गई और लोग तरावी पढ़ रहे हैं, तो क्या मैं तरावी की नमाज में ईशा की जो फर्ज नमाज है वो दो उसमें शामिल हो जाऊं और बाद में 2 रकात अपनी कंप्लीट कर लूं? क्या ऐसा कर सकता हूं?
Yeah, I think what you should do is that you should pay the nafil prayers, which are your tarawih prayers, separately. And then later on, you should offer your Isha prayer, because you see the Imam is now reading the nafil tarawih. So you should also join and count your prayer to be the prayer of tarawih. If you missed your Isha prayer, that should be offered later on.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for today's session.